Video recordings of this podcast can be found on raisingequity.org and Raising Equity on YouTube.
Welcome to Raising Equity. I'm Dr. Kira Banks, and in today's Diversity Download, I want to help you ask the question, or maybe answer the question, is your leadership capable of doing equity work? And so maybe if you're in a leadership position, you're asking yourself, am I really capable of doing this work? Because a lot of folks say that they want to do the work, but are they able to do the work? And I have a few questions that you can ask yourself or the leadership in your organization to help figure out if they really are capable to do the work. And I ask this question not as a smart aleck question, but one that needs to be answered to understand where you should put your effort and how much you should lean on an individual to be a leader for the work if they're not able to be the leader for the work, right? And so the first question that I want you to ask yourself, or perhaps the leadership in your organization, is, do you understand the difference between systems work and understanding the built landscape and the dynamics around us, and how that's different and distinct from individual level internal work? And the question is important because I've seen too many organizations frame DEI work as simply changing hearts and minds and making people less biased and making people be kind and having people have empathy. Those are all important qualities. It would be great if folks were able to take perspective and be in another person's shoes and understand and be empathetic about people's experiences. But that is not necessary to be a leader around equity work. And notice I said equity work, not DEI work. I actually think it's necessary around DEI work broadly, but what our conversation is moving towards is an understanding of how equity is about access and opportunity. And we want everyone to have access and opportunity. So yes, along the way, we want representation and we also want inclusion. But I think it's really important for organizations to really anchor their work in equity work, because too often we just think about tokens, quotas, and having representation, and we have then patted ourselves on the back and said, voila, we succeeded, and that's not sufficient. So I really do want you to push the envelope to ask yourself, are we capable of doing equity work? If you're doing diversity work and inclusion work, that has its place, but it should not be seen as synonymous with doing equity work, which is about access and opportunity. And to be able to do that work, you need to understand the difference between the systems, the patterns, the barriers that are in place for some groups versus others, and how that is different than doing individual work. And the example I'll give here is, on an individual level, you might be really passionate about mentoring people, and you might see someone who's up and coming, an emerging leader in your field, and say, I want to help that person. I want to help that person have more of a network. I want to help that person hone their skills so that they're ready for that next promotion or that next level. And I also want to help them get to that next level. And so that's an idea of around mentoring that's very individual focused. And so that would be an approach that you might take if you want to think about diversity or inclusion. But if you want to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you think about what are the barriers in place that would keep that person from having a network, but for my mentoring? What are the barriers that are in place that would keep that person from having the professional development opportunities, the skill building opportunities to be ready for that next promotion if I weren't individually mentoring them? That is understanding the built landscape. What is around us? What is the pattern of experiences for people, maybe from that people group, whether it's around race or gender or nation of origin or language of origin or whatever aspect of diversity or social identity that they ascribe to and that they identify with. What are the different experiences that they might come up against? And seeing those barriers, removing them, that's equity work. Or even the flip side of that, noticing that there's some groups that are just seeming to get ahead and have access and opportunity. And when we look at the inequities, they're the group that's on top, whether it's around race or gender, right? What is in place for them in the built landscape? What is in place in the environment? That is another way to look and see, so what's happening is the professional development opportunities are happening sooner, or maybe they're happening at a larger scale and more competitive programs, and not just siphoning them off the opportunities that are for just people of certain racial or ethnic groups. I've heard that happen in companies where they say, oh, yeah, I'm going to send you this multicultural leadership event. Well, no, I want to go to the big name one that everyone wants to go to that would then transfer across multiple companies, right? So there's a both and of wanting to support folks' identity, but also not keeping them from opportunities. But I say all that to say, sometimes we can understand the built landscape by seeing what folks who have access and opportunity also have in place, because maybe we can extend that. So if we see, oh, they have this networking, they have these professional development opportunities, how do we then make sure that those opportunities are given to everyone and that everyone has access to those professional development opportunities? I think it's also important here to say that equity does not equal everyone will have the same outcome. It's about giving people access and opportunity. So that's the first question. The second question is, ask yourself or the leader, are you able to admit when you don't know? Are you able to take feedback, maybe even from someone who's in a subordinate position or not at your level in terms of your role at work? Like, are you really able to have a growth mindset with yourself? I ask this question because many folks who are highly successful have gotten there because they know a lot and they've achieved a lot. And when we think about equity, it's not something that we can necessarily point to and say, oh, they have it figured out over there. If it were that easy, we would just be following that rule book. Not the case. And so we have to be willing to be humble. We have to be willing to take feedback, maybe even be questioned in a way that we're not used to being questioned because we're in charge. We know some things. That's why we're in the position that we're in. And so to start this work in earnest, you really do have to be willing to humble yourself and to realize there's a lot that you don't know. You might not even know what you don't know. And to be able to step into that place of taking feedback and receiving it as a gift. And then the last question is, are you able to go beyond just thinking about this work as a form of compliance and we just got to do it to not be sued or to not end up in the news again, or I'm willing to support this initiative or this month? Are you able to go beyond thinking about it in those ways to thinking about it as this needs to be integrated into every part of our organization? It needs to be leader-led in the sense that anyone who's a leader in the organization, even if they don't have diversity, equity, or inclusion in their title, plays a role in this work. Deloitte has a maturity model for organizations, a 1 to a 4, where it says, how mature are you in this work? And 1 is about the compliance, let's just not get sued. 2 is about programs and initiatives. We might have a problem, so let's do this program. 3 is where you start to realize, okay, the work is on all leaders and for them to see what's happening to make sure they can level the playing field. So that language is in their model. And I really think that that's where they start to touch on equity, right? If we're looking at what's happening in the organization and making sure that people have access and opportunity, that's equity work. And that's where you're at a 3. And that shift from 2 to 3, that shift from programs and initiatives to leader-led is a big one because so many folks think about, oh, well, that's the DEI, that's their job, whether it's HR or a group that has it in their title. But really, every member of the organization has a role to play. And so 3 is about leaders understanding that work, and then 4 is about everyone throughout the organization. It's integrated. A lot of organizations jump to try to be a 4. They'll try to do their diversity, equity, inclusion work from the bottom up. They have maybe a group of ready, eager individual contributors who want to give their time. But if leaders haven't bought in, if this work is siloed, if there hasn't been an investment in time, money, resources from the top, it's not going to be sustained over time. And so to do the work well means you do it over time. And so I hope these questions can help you think about if you're capable of leading this work or if the leadership in your organization is capable. So the question around, do you understand that it's about systems, not just individuals? So it's not just about hearts and minds, but also the systems, the structures, the built landscape that's around us. Are you able to take feedback and receive it as the gift that it is? And are you able to move beyond just a Band-Aid approach, programs and initiatives, to really holding accountable all leadership in the organization, and then and only then others in the organization to see it as work across all roles, not just folks who have it in their title. Hopefully this has helped you think about your capacity or those who you're working with. You can find me if you want to hear more on social media. I'm Kira Banks on Twitter, Dr. Kira Banks on Instagram and Facebook. Thanks for joining me on Raising Equity.